Hi, guys. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Welcome to another Made New Monday. I am Coach V. We are going to talk a little bit about this week's podcast episode of Transformative Talk with Coach V. And we are going to be talking about the topic today of how do you define yourself? And so earlier in this season, we talked about your family history is not your future. And we dug deep into how oftentimes we allow our family history and things that have happened, with our mother, our grandmother, our great grandmother to have an impact or influence in our lives and the legacy that we leave. And we talk about some transformative truths to break free of those things, to break those generational curses and begin to set a trajectory and a legacy, leave a legacy for those that come behind us that is one that's empowered, one that's inspired, one that has been greatly transformed and blazed the trail to do differently and to do better and to do greater. And so in this week's episode, where we're talking about how you're defined, it has a lot to do with looking at your family history and making that decision to do different, to show up different, to blaze a new trail, if you will, so that others that come behind you, your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, they have this different representation here in the earth of that they can live a different life, that they would go out and do greater than you, but you have blazed a trail, that you've established something different from what maybe they have heard or have seen, that makes them bold and courageous to then step out and do something maybe even bolder or even more courageous or outside of the box because you were the first one to do it. If we think about those that have gone before us in history, in our own families, when we look at, people that we look up to, that we speak of in the historical sense, they have done something different, even though what has been said, it was impossible, that it could not be done. Because someone was afraid to dream or to take those steps because what they saw in front of them, it didn't seem possible. So, why step out of the mold, or why dare to do something different that could really, endanger my life or take my life? When we think about the civil rights era of the 50s and 60s, but because those people were willing to do something different, because they were willing to be bold and fearless and courageous, then we therefore can be bold and fearless and courageous and forge new paths for not only for ourselves, but for those that come behind us. And so when we think about defining ourselves, we talk about in this episode the things that we allow to define us. And then, of course, we always talk about some transformative truths to get out of that old mindset of how we have been defined, how we have been spoken of, how we've allowed others to speak to us and define us. And we begin to step out of that mold and that shape and form and create something for ourselves that will speak to generations to come. And so this week's transformative thought, because we always do one and we talk about it briefly in the video, is this: I am no longer defined by, I'm sorry, I have to read my notes. I am no longer defined by my past or what others think of me or what the world thinks of me. I am defined by what God says about me and what he desires to do in me for the earth. I know that was kind of long, but I'm going to say it again. I no longer am defined by my past or what the world thinks. I am defined by what God says about me and by what he desires to do through me. That should be our focus in remembering what the Word of God says about us. Remembering that He told us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are created in His image. Things that we often say to ourselves, that we are above and not beneath, that we are the head and not the tail. And so we say those things, but do we truly define ourselves by those things? And do we stand on those things as we go through life? Are those the precepts and concepts that we walk boldly and fearlessly into our destiny, to change the trajectory of our life, to break those generational curses, to forge a new path, something that others may not have had the resources or the boldness or the courage to be able to do. And so when we take a look even at the life of Jesus, even if we take a moment to think about that, he did things that others couldn't do. He did the things that God enabled him to do. As his only son, he was able to no longer be in a mindset of selfishness, but to say, not my will, but your will be done. And it's the same perspective that we have to have in our own lives, that it is not our will, not by our plan, not by the agenda that we have set forth, but it be the will of the Father to do whatever he desires to do in the earth through us. The things that we experience, the things that we encounter, they're not for us. Yes, we're going through it. Yes, we're feeling the pain. Yes, we're going through the trial. We're going through the tribulation. We're experiencing the isolation, the heartbreak. We're experiencing people misunderstanding us. We are experiencing people walking away from us. But at the end of the day, it's the testimony to what God truly desires to do in our life. And what he removes, he is faithful to replace. And so we cannot be defined by the things of this world. We cannot be defined by the material things of this world. You know, God desires us to, have nice things and live in abundance and overflow. He has all of those things stored up to us, but we are not defined by the type of handbag that we carry. We're not defined by the type of home that we live in. We're not defined by the salary that we receive from a job or the degrees that we have. They all play a role and have a place and a purpose. But at the same time, we're not defined by those things. When we reach the gates of heaven, he is not going to be talking about the car that we drove or the great job with the benefits that we had or how many people that we had as followers and friends on Facebook and Instagram. That is not what he's going to judge us by. He's going to judge us by us having been faithful to the assignment that he gave us. That is what's going to define us. That is what sets us apart from others, because we make that the focus of everything that we do. That's not going to be the conversation. The conversation is going to be about offering forgiveness. Did you lead this person to Christ? Did you do everything that you needed to do? That is what defines us. That's the example that we should desire to set before people, not flaunting material things in front of them, giving them this sense of lack of self-confidence or feeling as if they don't measure up to us because we have these things and that they have to have these things to feel relatable or accepted by us. That's wrong. And we have done that for far too long. And it continues to go on. If we look at television, if we look at social media, if we look at reality TV, these are the things that our children grow up seeing. And even as adults, those are things that we absorb and think that that's what we have to attain to have a certain level of status. But is there any respect? Is there any integrity? Is there any character behind that? And if we sit and look at that and say that the answer is no, then it's time to shift that perspective and get that proper perspective and transform our mindsets to be defined by the things that God has put inside of us, the gifts and talents and abilities that he's put on the inside of us, that we are to be pouring out into the earth, into the kingdom, so that the kingdom grows and so that people are drawn to the light of God on the inside of us, and that they desire to have the same type of relationship, that they desire to have that same thing happen to them that is happening to us. That is what defines us, that we are pleasing God, that we are serving Him, and that we are doing everything that He calls us to do, that we are being a good stewards over that which He gives us. The time, the talent, the treasures, the gifts, the abilities, all of those things are what ultimately define us. Being faithful to the assignment that God has given us and doing that well until He calls us to be with Him. And so I hope that as you listen to this episode and we talk about the things that we often let define us, and that we go into a place that we begin to reevaluate and redefine ourselves according to the Word of God, that it will be some things that you will reflect on over the week, and even take time in your meditation time, your prayer time, your journal time, to seek God on a deeper level about what you have been allowing to define you, and have that contrite heart to allow God to redefine you. And so, thank you again for joining me for another episode of Transformative Talk with Coach V. Go and check out this week's podcast episode. You can find it on Anchor, you can find it on Apple, and you can find it on Spotify. Feel free to reach out to me at madenewllc@yahoo.com if you have questions or comments or even topic ideas for the future. And remember, that today is a great day to be made new. And I am always, always rooting for you. Take care.